in 2020 during the election, you had voted for Trump, right?
Yes.
You're a two-time Trump voter?
Yeah, it's, let me put it this way. And I have some friends who are really devout Trump supporters, I'll put it that way. And they're good friends of mine. But I always felt that both times Trump was the lesser of two evils.
Okay.
I've written about that. I'm not a big fan of his, although I did like his policies during the first 4 years, well, his 4 years in the presidency. But I think he's volatile and unpredictable, and it makes me nervous.
So what was your feeling about the outcome of the election? Did you think that it had been stolen?
I don't like to say that because I don't have any proof.
Right.
And everything that I saw from people was implications. And, as a forensics expert, you see things all the time that imply that somebody took something or stole something. But until you investigate, you don't really know.
Yeah.
But my feeling from the beginning is that it was extremely unlikely that the voting machines were either hacked or malfunctioned because that would be detected. Somebody like me, there's a lot of people like me. I like to think I'm the best at what I do, but there's a lot of people like me out there. And one of us would have detected that. There's also cyber security analysts who monitor the internet, and they would detect that. So I thought it was really unlikely that voting, if there was any, well, let me put it this way. I can say for certain there was fraud in the election because every single human activity has fraud. And that's what keeps me in business. If there weren't fraud, I wouldn't be an expert witness on so many litigations.
Right.
But was it enough fraud to change the results of the election? I have no idea. And but I'm almost certain it didn't. I was almost certain before this that it didn't happen in the voting machines.
Got it. So what was Mike Lindell's claim?
Well, the claim changed over time, but I think very shortly after the election, he claimed that he had proof that the voting machines were hacked. I remember distinctly January of 2021, after Biden's inauguration, that he started making significant claims about that he had the proof of this. And but he said, there were claims that it was China that hacked in. There were some claims that it was the State Department or the Democrats. There were all kinds of claims. Eventually, he narrowed it down to China had hacked into the election.
Right. And was he expressing how much of an effect that actually had? Was he trying to say that that was the reason that Trump lost?
Yeah, absolutely. He kept putting out numbers, in fact. He still does this. He says, here's the number of votes that were switched from Trump to Biden that caused Biden to win the election. But I can tell you, we'll go into this. At the symposium that I went to, those numbers kept changing. He put numbers on the screen.
Right.
And he had invited a number of cyber experts like myself. And we were all saying, where did those numbers come from? But even as he spoke about the numbers on a big screen behind him, he'd look at them and say, oh, those numbers aren't even right. It was even more votes.
Oh, wow.
And all of us are thinking, where do these numbers come from?
So how did you first hear about the challenge, and explain exactly what the challenge was?
So I didn't realize that. I think the challenge was mostly on conservative media, and so I subscribed to conservative media. And I also have friends who told me about it. But basically, Mike Lindell got on conservative media. I think he got on some other outlets also. And he said he had what are called packet captures. Packet captures are capturing all the data on the internet, and showed that China had intercepted, at least this was the implication, had somehow intercepted votes that were being sent around the internet between voting machines, and he could show that they were changed from Trump to Biden.
Right.
And so he offered a $5 million challenge. He said, I'm going to hold this symposium, and I'm going to invite the best experts in the world to come look at it, and if anyone can prove me wrong, they'll get $5 million.
So what I don't understand is, it's one thing to go on all this media, claim what he's claiming. It's another thing to say, I'll give $5 million to anyone who can prove me wrong. But then it's a completely other thing for you to have a symposium where you give the data and challenge people to prove you wrong. He went so far in different steps, right? I thought that was really crazy. So what was on the agenda of the symposium? Where was it? When was it?
It was August of 2021.
Okay.
There was no agenda. I got there and I was given basically a blank agenda. What's interesting is that during my arbitration, which we'll talk about, agendas came up. During discovery, you can ask for documents. They turned over some strange documents that my lawyers and I were wondering, why did he ever turn this over? This doesn't help him.
Right.
I mean, you're obliged to turn over every document, but I've been in enough litigations that, people lose documents. And then how do we prove that they didn't lose them?
Right.
So we got some pretty, what I think are incriminating documents. But they gave us, in addition to that, they gave us agendas for the symposium. And that's the first time I ever saw an agenda. The agenda I got on the first day when I got there was something like, 9 o'clock, panel number 1, 10 o'clock, panel number 2, 11 o'clock, panel number 3, and 12 o'clock lunch. And all the agenda was just like that. And so I never knew who was going to show up.
Okay.
But,
So he was supposed to have speakers or
Right.
something like that. And did they ever show up?
So they did. I had to go online and using clues about what they said. He'd say like, "Oh, here is John who just did such and such," and I'd Google John and such and look for faces and say, "Oh, this is so and so." But honestly, it was Lindell. At least the first day, for sure, it was mostly Lindell talking nonstop. He'd have people on the panel, but he wouldn't give them much time to talk. He'd talk nonstop about election fraud and the proof and the deep state and China. And when he ran out of things to say, he'd ask everyone to get up and recite the Pledge of Allegiance or sing God Bless America.
No, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Just offhand, was he trying to sell My Pillows at the same time?
I don't think so, although it's hard to. I mean, people have accused him of that. But it's hard to say because he's selling all the time. I think the people there knew he was the CEO of My Pillow and selling My Pillows, and there was probably mention of My Pillow. He didn't come out. I mean, I've seen him on interviews where he says at the end, he says, "Oh, and by the way, you'll get a discount on My Pillows."
Right.
I don't remember him saying that, but everybody there knew. They might have been buying pillows for all I know.
Right. So who was invited to this symposium?
So there were reporters there and politicians. I've said, he's denied this, but I've said that everyone there seemed to be pro-Lindell and pro-Trump, with a very few exceptions. But among the cyber experts, you had to get invited. You had to supposedly be qualified and get invited. And he's denied this, but everyone that I came in touch with was a Trump supporter.
Okay.
Of the cyber experts. And also, when I say cyber experts, to be fair, they range from people who were really experts in their field to people who admitted that they were just IT people.
Got it.
And by IT people, I mean people who serviced computers. And I give them credit. I think every expert that was invited was sincere, honest, because we all agreed by the end of the conference, the 3-day conference, that Lindell did not have any data related to the 2020 election.